The 33 sermons on Nibbāna were delivered by the Venerable Bhikkhu Kaṭukurunde Ñāṇananda in Sinhala at Mitrigala Nissaranavanaya Forest Hermitage. They were translated into English by the same Venerable monk, presently residing at Potkulkala Forest Hermitage in Kandigedara Devalagam.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Etang santang etang panitang yadidang sabba sankhara samato sabbopadi patinissaggo annakkhyo virago nirodho nibbāna. This is peaceful, this is excellent, namely the stilling of all preparations, the relinquishment of all assets, the destruction of craving, detachment, cessation, extinction. With the permission of the most venerable great preceptor and the assembly of the venerable meditative monks, this is the 23rd sermon in the series of sermons on Nibbāna. The other day we brought up quotations to prove that Nibbāna, as the cessation of becoming, carries no implications of a nihilist or annihilationist view, because the Tathagata has transcended the concept of a being. It became evident from those quotations that to assert with an eternalist bias the proposition that the Tathagata exists after death, simply because he is referred to as a being or a person in the discourses, is contrary to the spirit of the Dhamma. The fact that the Arahant, who has done away with the latencies to conceits of I and mine, still continues to use even the words I and mine only as a concession to worldly conventions and common parlance, came to light from the Arahanta Sutta of the Samyutta Nikāya, quoted on an earlier occasion. To remind ourselves of the relevant section of that quotation, we may hark back to the following lines. Aham vadami tipiso vadeye, mamam vadanti tipiso vadeye. Loke samanyam kusalo viditva, voharamatena so vohare. He might still say, I speak. He might also say, they speak to me. Being skillful in knowing the worldly parlance, he uses such terms merely as a convention. The philosophy of wideness that emerges from those discourses, which declare that in reality there is no Tathagata, be compared to the blazing flames arise from the fistfuls of a highly inflammable incense powder at the end of an all-night ceremony of devil dancing. Generally, this fire ordeal is horrifying to the onlookers. The Buddha also had to stage a similar fire ordeal in the Dhammayaga, or the Dhamma sacrifice he administered to exorcise the malignant personality view, Sakkaya Ditthi, ingrained in the minds of worldlings. Of course, there is no explicit reference to such a fire ordeal in the discourses. However, we do come across a word somewhat suggestive of this kind of exorcism. The word vidhupeti, derived from the word dhupa, incense, is suggestive of fumigating or smoking out. For instance, we find the following verse in the Bodhivagga of the Udana, with reference to the stages of reflection on the law of dependent arising in direct and reverse order that the Buddha had gone through just after his enlightenment. Yada have patu bhavanti dhamma atapino jayato brahmanasya vidhupyam tithati marasena surya obhase mantarikam. When dhammas manifest themselves to the resolutely meditating Brahmin, he stands fumigating the modes of Mara, like the sun irradiating the firmament. The dispelling of the hordes of Mara is rather suggestive of a smoking out. In some other discourses, this verb vidhupeti is found contrasted with sandhupeti. The meaning of both these verbs, which have the dhupa element in common, is not quite clear. It is likely that the two words imply two functions of the ritual associated with incense. While some fragrant kinds of incense are used for propitiating benevolent spirits, certain caustic types are utilized for exorcising evil spirits. For instance, in the Kajjaniya Sutta of the Samyutta Nikāya, With reference to the noble disciple, the phrase vidhupeti na sandhupeti occurs. Since the implicit reference is again to the hordes of Mara, the phrase could be rendered as he exorcises and does not propitiate. The ordinary worldling's mode of recognition of the Tathagata is comparable to the recognition of a vortex that has already ceased with the help of the flotsam and jetsam lightly floating around it. Even after the vortex has ceased, flotsam and jetsam could still go on rotating, giving the wrong impression that the vortex is still there. If one understands that the vortex has actually ceased deep down at its center, and that what remains there now is the great ocean, undifferentiated and unique, one can get rid of the unfounded fear arising from the statement that there is no Tathagata in truth and fact. The cessation of the puny center of the whirlpool is equivalent to inheriting an expansive great ocean. It is where a vortex ceases that the great ocean prevails unhindered. To give up the limitations of a vortex is to inherit the limitless ocean. The irony arising from these statements is already implicit in the term Arahant. We use this term with reference to the Buddha as well as the Arahants. Though the commentators later attributed various other meanings to the term, the basic sense is to be worthy of gifts. In fact, it is being worthy of receiving everything. It is by giving up all that one becomes worthy of all. Here too we have a paradox. To become an Arahant is to let go of everything. Craving has to be fully abandoned. It is when all desires are gone, when everything is given up, that one becomes worthy of receiving everything. This is the deeper side of the significance of the term Arahant. There are 6 modes of measuring in accordance with the conceit and Nibbāna. What is known as Salayatana, or the 6 sense bases, comprise the 6 scales of measurement asserting the conceit M. At whatever point of time the measuring, evaluating and assessing done by the 6 sense bases, such as the eye, ear, nose, etc., ceases, the person concerned thereby becomes immeasurable, invaluable and boundless. It is here that the simile of the vortex and the ocean becomes meaningful. So the only way of becoming immeasurable and boundless is to abandon all those scales of measurement. This might sound extremely strange. With the cessation of a vortex, the attention of one who has been looking at it turns towards the depth, immeasurability and boundlessness of the great ocean. This line of reflection might even enable one to get a glimpse of an unworldly beauty in this philosophy of the void, which drives an unfounded fear into the minds of the worldlings. We do get positive proof of this fact in such sections of the Dhammapada as those entitled The Flowers, The Worthy, The Buddha and The Brahman, as well as in a number of discourses in the Sutta Nibbāna, where we come across marvelously scintillating verses. This is understandable, since the dawn of that wisdom which sees the wideness of a self, and of everything belonging to a self, and the attainment of the fruits of the path in the light of that wisdom, marks the efflorescence as well as the fruition of the samsaric existence of a being. This idea comes up, for instance, in the section on flowers in the Dhammapada. Yatha sankara dhanasmin ujjitasmin mahapathe padumang tatthajayetha suchigandham manoramam evam sankara bhutesu andabhute putujjani atirojati panyaya samma sambuddhasa. As on top of a rubbish heap dumped by the highway side, there blossoms forth the lotus, pure in fragrance and charm. So amidst the worldling's brine, the fully awakened one's disciple outshines them in marked contrast in point of wisdom bright. So then the Arahant is that charming lotus rising out of the cesspool of samsara. Surely there cannot be anything frightful about it. There is nothing to get scared about this prospect. In our last sermon, we quoted from a discourse that gives some new definitions and new concepts of the world. We brought up 2 statements from the Loka Kama Guna Sutta number 1 of the Salayatana Magga in the Samyutta Nikāya. The first statement is somewhat riddle-like. There the Buddha addresses the monks and declares, Nāhaṃ bhikkhave gamanena lokasa antam ñātayyam datthayyam pattayyanti vadāmi. Neca panāṃ bhikkhave appatvā lokasa antam dukkasa antakiyam vadāmi. Monks, I do not say that by traveling one can come to know or see or reach the end of the world. Nor do I say that without reaching the end of the world one can put an end to suffering. He also mentioned the other day the explanation given by Venerable Ñāṇananda to this cryptic statement at the request of those monks who approached him to get it clarified. That explanation embodies the definition given by the Buddha to the term world. It is not the common concept of the world. Yena kova uso lokasmin lokasanyi hoti lokamani. Ayam ucchati aryassa vinī loko. Kena ca uso lokasmin lokasanyi hoti lokamani. Chakkuna kova uso lokasmin lokasanyi hoti lokamani. Soten, ghānen, jivhān, kāyen, manena kova uso lokasmin lokasanyi hoti lokamani. Yena kova uso lokasmin lokasanyi hoti lokamani. Ayam ucchati aryassa vinī loko. Friends, that by which one has a perception of the world and has a conceit of the world, that in this discipline of the noble ones is called the world. By what friends has one a perception of the world and a conceit of the world? By the eye, friends, one has a perception of the world and a conceit of the world. By the ear, by the nose, by the tongue, by the body, by the mind, that friends by which one has a perception of the world and a conceit of the world, that in this discipline of the noble ones is called the world. That with which the world is measured, that itself is called the world. The above mentioned measuring rods, namely the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body and the mind, give us a conceit of the world and a perception of the world. Apart from these six, there is no way of knowing a world. All theories about the world are founded on these six sense bases. By way of a simple illustration, we alluded to the fact that in the absence of any standard measuring rod, we resort to the primordial scales based on this physical frame of ours, such as the inch, the span, the foot, and the feather. The subtlest scale of measurement, however, is that based on the mind. It is in this mode of measuring and reckoning that concepts and designations play their part. But the Buddha's philosophy of the void goes against all these mental modes. Its exorcism by the vision of the void fumigates all concepts and designations. The six sense bases are therefore so many scales of measurement. It is with the help of these that the world is measured. So the above definition of the world brings out the prepared sankata nature of the world. It is a thought construct. This does not amount to a negation of the role of materiality. All we mean to say is that the concept of the world is actually an outcome of these six sense bases. To that extent, it is something prepared, a thought construct. While discussing the 10 indeterminate points on a previous occasion, we happened to mention that the first four among them concern the world. 1. The world is eternal. 2. The world is not eternal. 3. The world is finite. 4. The world is infinite. What those theorists meant by the term world in this context is none other than that prepared world which is constructed by the six sense bases. That is to say, it is just the concept of the world. However, they were not aware of the fact that their concept of the world is a thought construct, because they had no insight into the law of dependent arising. They did not understand that these are mere preparations. The fallacy involved here, that is, the inability to understand that their concept of the world is the outcome of wrong attention, we illustrated by the simile of the magic kettle. In an exhibition, a magic kettle is displayed from which water keeps on flowing into a basin. One curious onlooker is waiting to see the kettle empty, while the other is waiting to see the basin overflowing. Both are unaware of the fact that a hidden tube conveys the water back again to the kettle, unseen through the same flow of water. The ordinary concept of the world carries with it the same fallacy. The worldlings under the sway of defilements, which thrive on the perception of the compact, ghana-saññā, have the habit of grasping everything. The ordinary man of the world, fully overcome by craving and grasping, entertains the perception of permanence since he has no insight. That is why he regards the world as a unit due to his perception of the compact, as he takes cognizance only of the arising aspect, ignoring the decaying aspect. Whether such a world is eternal or not is the point at issue in the case of the first set of questions mentioned above, while the next set poses the dilemma whether it is finite or infinite. What is at the root of all those ill-conceived notions is the premise that it is possible to posit an absolute existence or an absolute non-existence. In other words, the two extreme views, everything exists and nothing exists. The unique norm of dependent arising, which the Buddha discovered, dismisses both those extreme views. It is set forth in the Kaṭukurunde Sutta of the Nibbāna Samyutta in Samyutta Nikāya, which we have quoted earlier too. We shall, however, bring up again the relevant section to elucidate this point. Dvenisito kāyam kaccāyana loko ye bhujena atitam teva natitanchit. Loka samudayam ko kaccāyana yatha bhutang sammappannāya passato ya loke natita sāna hoti. Loka nirodham ko kaccāyana yatha bhutang sammappannāya passato ya loke yatita sāna hoti. This word Kaṭukurunde, for the most part, bases its views on two things, on existence and non-existence. Now Kaṭukurunde, to one who with right wisdom sees the arising of the world as it is, the view of non-existence regarding the world does not occur. And to one who with right wisdom sees the cessation of the world as it really is, the view of existence regarding the world does not occur. This is where our simile of the magic kettle becomes meaningful. Had both onlookers understood that the magic kettle is getting filled at the same time it gets emptied, and that the basin also gets filled while it is being emptied, they would not have the curiosity to go on looking at it. In contradistinction to both these viewpoints, the law of dependent arising promulgated by the Buddha transcends them by penetrating into the concept as such. The Buddha explained the arising of the world in terms of the 12 factors, beginning with dependent on ignorance preparations, precisely because it cannot be presented in one word. Usually, the formula of dependent arising is summed up with the words ayam dukkha samudayo. This is the arising of suffering, or with the more conclusive statement eva metassa kevalassa dukkha khandasa samudayo hoti. Thus is the arising of this entire mass of suffering. There are also instances of explaining the arising of the world through the principle underlying the norm of dependent arising. The world arises in the 6 sense bases. It is at the same time the arising of suffering. The arising of suffering is almost synonymous with the arising of the world. The law of dependent arising is an explanation of the way a concept of the world comes about. This is an extremely subtle point. Since the concept of the world is a product of wrong reflection, it is sankhata, or prepared. It is like something imagined. The sankhata, or the prepared, has a certain circularity about it. In fact, the two dilemmas mentioned above involve the question of time and space. The question whether the world is eternal or not eternal concerns time, whereas the question whether the world is finite or infinite relates to space. Both time and space involve a circularity. The furthest limit of the forenoon is the nearest limit of the afternoon, and the furthest limit of the afternoon is the nearest limit of the forenoon. This is how the cycle of the day turns round. Where the forenoon ends is the afternoon. Where the afternoon ends is the forenoon. A similar time cycle is to be found even in one moment. Rise and fall occur as a cycle even within a single moment. The same process goes on within an eon. That is why an eon is said to have the two aspects called samvatta, contraction, and vivatta, expansion. World systems go on contracting and expanding. The so-called existence of the world is a continuous process of contraction and expansion. Therefore, it is impossible to find any beginning or end. The very question of a first beginning is ill-conceived. It is like an attempt to find a starting point in a cycle. It is a problem that cannot be solved by speculation. Because of the cyclic nature of existence, rise and fall is characteristic of every single moment. It is by ignoring the decaying aspect inherent in one moment that wrong reflection gives rise to the inference that there must be an absolute end of the world. Because the visible world gets destroyed, one conceives of an absolute end of the world. But when one world system gets destroyed, another world system gets crystallized somewhere else. Speculative views and standpoints about the universe, current among the worldlings, are of such a misleading nature that any reasoning based on them leads to a circularity of argument, as is evident from the Lokayatika Brahmana Sutta among the nines of the Anguttara Nikaya. This discourse is about two Lokayatika Brahmins. The term Lokayatika is a derivative from Lokayata, which signifies a branch of knowledge dealing with the length and breadth of the world, perhaps a prototype of modern science, though it relied more on logic than on experiment. The two Brahmins were probably students of such a branch of learning. One day they came to the Buddha and posed this question. Saya Gautama, now there is this teacher Pūranakassapa, who claims omniscience, saying that he sees everything and has knowledge and vision of everything while walking or standing, whether asleep or awake. With these claims to omniscience, he makes the following declaration. Aham anantena ñāṇena anantang lokam jnanam passam viharam. I dwell knowing and seeing an infinite world with an infinite knowledge. But then there is this teacher Nibbāna Buddha who also has similar claims to omniscience, but declares, Aham antavantena ñāṇena antavantang lokam jnanam passam viharam. I dwell knowing and seeing a finite world with a finite knowledge. Then the two Brahmins asked the Buddha, which of these two teachers claiming omniscience in such contradictory terms is correct? But the Buddha's reply was, Arang Brahmana Tithatetam Dhammang Vodesisam. Enough Brahmins, let that question be, I shall preach to you the Dhamma. The expression used here is suggestive of the fact that the question belongs to the category of unexplained points. Terms like thapita, left aside, and thapaniya, should be left aside, are used with reference to indeterminate points. Why did the Buddha leave the question aside? We can guess the reason, though it is not stated as such. Now the standpoint of Pūranakassapa is, I dwell knowing and seeing an infinite world with an infinite knowledge. One can question the validity of his claim with the objection, you see an infinite world because your knowledge is not finite, that is to say, incomplete. If it is complete, there must be an end. Therefore, going by the sense of incompleteness in the word anantam, one can refute the former view. Why you see the world as infinite is because your knowledge lacks finality. Nibbāna Buddha, on the other hand, is asserting that he sees a finite world with a finite knowledge. But the followers of Pūranakassapa can raise the objection. You are seeing the world as finite because your knowledge is limited. Your knowledge has an end, that is why you see a finite world. So here too we have a circle, or rather a circularity of argument. The two terms anta and ananta are ambiguous. That must be the reason why the Buddha rejected the two standpoints in question. Then he declares, I shall preach to you the Dhamma, and brings up as a simile an illustration which could be summed up as follows. 4 persons endowed with the highest ability to walk, the highest speed and the widest stride possible, stand in the 4 directions. Their speed is that of an arrow, and their stride is as wide as the distance between the Eastern Ocean and the Western Ocean. Each of them tells himself, I will reach the end of the world by walking, and goes on walking for 100 years, that being his full lifespan, resting just for eating, drinking, defecating, urinating, and giving way to sleep or fatigue, only to die on the way without reaching the end of the world. But why so? Asked the Buddha rhetorically, and gives the following explanation. I do not say, O Brahmins, that the end of the world can be known, seen, or reached by this sort of running. Nor do I say that there is an end of suffering without reaching the end of the world. Then he declares, Brahmins, It is these 5 strands of sense pleasures that in the Noble One's discipline are called the world. In this particular context, the Buddha calls these 5 kinds of sense pleasures the world, according to the Noble One's terminology. This does not contradict the earlier definition of the world in terms of the 6 sense bases, for it is by means of these 6 sense bases that one enjoys the 5 strands of sense pleasures. However, as an art of preaching, the Buddha defines the world in terms of the 5 strands of sense pleasures in this context. Then he goes on to proclaim the way of transcending this world of the 5 sense pleasures in terms of jhanic attainments. When one attains to the first jhana, one is already far removed from that world of the 5 sense pleasures. But about him, the Buddha makes the following pronouncement. Ahampi brahmana evam vadāmi, ahampi loka pariyāpanna, ahampi anissato lokam. And I too, O Brahmin, say this. This one too is included in the world. This one too has not stepped out of the world. The Buddha makes the same pronouncement with regard to those who attain to the other jhanic levels. But finally he comes to the last step with these words. Punaca param brahmana, Bhikkhu, sabbaso neva saññā nā saññāyatanam samapikkam, saññā vedayita nirodham upasampadya viharati, paññāya chas disvā āsavā parikkhīnā honti, ayam uccati brahmana, Bhikkhu, lokasa antaṃ āgam, lokasa ante viharati, tinno loke visattikam. But then, O Brahmins, the monk, having completely transcended the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, attains to and abides in the cessation of perceptions and feelings. And in him, having seen with wisdom, the influxes are made extinct. This one, O Brahmins, is known as one who, on reaching the end of the world, is dwelling at its very end, having crossed over the agglutinative flame. Going by these discourses, one might conclude that the cessation of perceptions and feelings is actually Nibbāna itself. But the most important part of the above quotation is the statement, paññāya chasa disvā āsava parikkhīnā. Having seen with wisdom, the influxes are made extinct in him. While in the attainment of the cessation of perceptions and feelings, all preparations subside, and it is on arising from it that all influxes are made extinct by the vision of wisdom. This fact comes to light in the following answer of Venerable Dhammadinna Theri to the question raised by the lay follower Visakha, her former husband, in the Chulavedala Sutta. Saññā vedita nirodha samāpattiya utthitam ko āuso Visakha bhikkhun tayo phassa pusanti. Suññato phasso, animitto phasso, appanito phasso. Friend Visakha, when the monk has emerged from the attainment of the cessation of perceptions and feelings, 3 kinds of contact touching: voidless contact, signless contact, desireless contact. On this point, the commentary too gives the explanation. Suññata nama phalasmāpatti. Voidness means the attainment of the fruit of around food. In answer to another question, Venerable Dhammadinna Theri says, Saññā vedayita nirodha samāpattiya avutthitassa ko āvuso Visakha bhikkhuno viveka ninnam cittang hoti viveka ponam viveka pabbhāram. Friend Visakha, when the monk has emerged from the attainment of the cessation of perceptions and feelings, his mind inclines to seclusion, slants to seclusion, tends to seclusion. Here the commentary explains, Nibbāna vivekonam. What is called seclusion is simple. So it is on emerging from the attainment of the cessation of perceptions and feelings, that is, in the Arhatapara Samadhi, references to which we have cited earlier, that Nibbāna is realized. It is then that one actually sees the end of the world. So from this we can well infer that in advancing a new definition of the world, in introducing a new concept of the world, the Buddha was not trying to sidetrack the moot point of the worldlings by bringing in something totally irrelevant. He was simply rejecting, for some sound reason, the worldling's concept of the world, which is born of wrong reflection, and illustrating the correct measuring rod, the true criterion of judgment regarding the origin of the concept of the world according to radical reflection. Out of all the discourses dealing with the question of the end of the world, and the end of suffering. Perhaps the most significant is the Rohitassa Sutta, which is found in the Sagataka Samyutta of the Samyutta Nikaya, as well as in the section of the Force in the Anguttara Nikaya. Once, when the Buddha was staying at the Jetavana monastery at Savatthi, a deity named Rohitassa visited him in the night and asked the following question. Where, Lord, one does not get born, no grow old, no die, no pass away, no get reborn, is one able, Lord, by traveling to come to know that end of the world, or to see it, or to get there? The Buddha replies, where, friend, one does not get born, no grow old, no die, no pass away, no get reborn, that end of the world, I say, one is not able by traveling to come to know, or to see, or to arrive at. When the Buddha gave this brief answer, the deity Rohitassa praised him with the following words of approbation. Accharyang bhante, abhutang bhante, yav subhavitang idam bhagavata. It is wonderful, Lord, it is marvelous, Lord, how well it is said by the Exalted One. Why did he express his approbation? Because he had already realized the truth of the Buddha's statement by his own experience. Then he goes on to relate the whole story of his past life. In times past, Lord, I was a seer, Rohitassa by name, son of Bhoja, gifted so that I could fly through the air, and so swift, Lord, was my speed, that I could fly just as quickly as a master of archery, well-trained, expert, proficient, a past master in his art, armed with a strong bow, could without difficulty send a light arrow far past the area covered by a palm tree's shadow. And so great, Lord, was my stride that I could step from the eastern to the western ocean. In me, Lord, arose such a wish as this. I will arrive at the end of the world by walking. And though such, Lord, was my speed, and such my stride, and though with a lifespan of a century, living for 100 years, I walked continuously for 100 years, except for the time spent in eating, drinking, chewing or tasting, or in answering calls of nature, and the time I gave way to sleep or fatigue, yet I died on the way without reaching the end of the world. Wonderful is it, O Lord, marvelous is it, Lord, how well it is said by the Exalted One. Where, friend, one does not get born, no grow old, no die, no pass away, no get reborn, that end of the world, I say, one is not able by traveling to come to know, or to see, or to arrive at. It is at this point that the Buddha comes out with a momentous declaration while granting Rohitassa's approbation. Yattako avso na jayati na jiyati na miyati na chavati na upapadyati nahantam gamanina lokasantam yateyam tatheyam patteyam vadami. Nachahang avso appatva lokasantam dukkha santiyam vadami. Apichahang avso imasminya vyamate kalevare sasannine supanake Lokancha panyapemi, loka samdhyante, loka nirodhante, loka nirodhagam patipada. Where, friend, one does not get born, no grow old, no die, no pass away, no get reborn, that end of the world, I say, one is not able by traveling to come to know, or to see, or to arrive at. But neither do I say, friend, that without having reached the end of the world, there could be an ending of suffering. It is in this very fathom-long physical frame with its perceptions and mind that I declare lies the world, the arising of the world, the cessation of the world, and the path leading to the cessation of the world. This momentous declaration, which is comparable to a fearless lion's roar that puts all religious and philosophical systems to flight, has been misinterpreted by some who have not grasped its true significance. They say that according to this discourse, the cessation of the world is not here, and that only the other three are to be found in this fathom-long body. Such misinterpretations are the result of taking seriously various far-fetched speculations of late origin about Nibbāna. According to them, Nibbāna is some mysterious, nondescript place of rest for the Arhants after their demise. One who goes by that kind of speculation is not ready to accept the Buddha's declaration that it is in this very fathom-long body with its perceptions and mind that the cessation of the world can be realized. The commentary in this context simply observes that the Four Noble Truths are to be found not in grass and twigs outside, but in this body consisting of the four elements. It has nothing more to add. A certain modern scholar has rightly pointed out that the commentator has missed a great opportunity for exegesis. The reason for the commentator's lack of interest in the case of such a discourse of paramount importance is probably his predilection for these later speculations on Nibbāna. All what we have so far stated in explaining the significance of discourses dealing with the subject of Nibbāna could even be treated as a fitting commentary to the Rohittasa Sutta. The point of relevance is the couple of words sasaññimme samanati occurring in the discourse in question. This fathom-long physical frame is here associated with perceptions and mind. The expression used by the Buddha in this context is full of significance. As we saw above, Venerable Ñāṇananda defines the term world as follows. Vienako aso lokasmin lokasaññiñ hodi lokamāni ayam bucchati ariyassaviññi loko. Friends, that by which one has a perception of the world and has a conceit of the world, that in the discipline of the Noble Ones is called the world. The conceit of the world is a form of measuring with the mind. So the two words sasaññimme samanati are suggestive of the concept of the world in the Noble One's discipline. While discussing the significance of Arahatta Phala Samapatti, also known as Aññā Phala Samadhi and Aññā Vimukha, we had occasion to bring up such quotations as the following. Suyānukho bhante bhikkhuno tatharuvo samadhi patilabho yatha neva pataviyang patavisaññiyasya na pasmin apo saññiyasya na tejasmin tejo saññiyasya na vayasmin vayo saññiyasya na agasananchayatane agasananchayatana saññiyasya na viññānañchayatane viññānañchayatana saññiyasya na akincaññāyatane saññiyasya na neva saññāna saññayatane neva saññāna saññayatana saññiyasya na idaloke idaloka saññiyasya na paraloke paraloka saññiyasya yampitang gittang sutang mutang viññātang pattang pariyayitang anuvicharitang manasa tatsāpina saññiyasya saññīca panasya. Could there be, Lord, for a monk such an attainment of concentration wherein he will not be conscious, literally percipient, of earth in earth, nor of water in water, nor of fire in fire, nor of air in air, nor will he be conscious of the sphere of infinite space in the sphere of infinite space, nor of the sphere of infinite consciousness in the sphere of infinite consciousness, nor of the sphere of nothingness in the sphere of nothingness, nor of the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception in the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. Nor will he be conscious of this world in this world, nor of a world beyond in a world beyond. Whatever is seen, heard, sensed, cognized, attained, sought after, travels by the mind, even of that he will not be conscious. And yet he will be conscious. The Arahatta Phala Samadhi is so extraordinary that while in it one has no perception of earth, water, fire and air, or of this world or of the other world, or whatever is seen, heard, sensed and cognized, but one is all the same percipient or conscious. Saññīca panasya. To the question of what is a percipient, King Saññī, once Venerable Sariputta gave the answer that the perception is of Nibbāna as the cessation of existence. Bhavanirodho Nibbāna. In another discourse that we happen to quote, the mode of questioning has the following sequence. Could there be, Lord, for a monk such an attainment of concentration, wherein he will not be attending to the eye, nor to form, nor to the ear, nor to sound, etc., but ends with a riddle-like face, yet he will be attending. Manasica panakari. When the Buddha grants the possibility of such concentration, Venerable Ñāṇananda rejoins with an inquisitive, how could there be, Lord? And the Buddha explains that what a monk attains to while in that attainment could be summed up in the stereotyped phrase, etang santang etang panitang yadidang sabba sankhara samato sabbopadi patinissaggo tanhakkyo virago nirodho nibbāna. This is peaceful, this is excellent, namely the stilling of all preparations, the relinquishment of all assets, the destruction of craving, detachment, cessation, extinction. It is Nibbāna then that one attains to while in that attainment. So we find even the terms perception, saññā, and attention, manasikara, being used in the context of Arahata Pala or attainment to the fruit of Arahanthood. Therefore, Nibbāna is not an experience as dry as a log of wood, but a state of serene awareness of its true significance. It is a transcendence of the world by realization of its cessation. That is why the two words Sasanjuni Samanati, with its perceptions and mind, have been used to qualify Kalevari, physical frame or body, in the momentous declaration. We also came across some instances in the discourses where the Buddha calls the cessation of the six sense spheres itself Nibbāna. The most notable instance is perhaps the Kāṭukurunde Sutta we had already quoted. As we saw, even its presentation is rather enigmatic, which runs, Tasmāte bhikkhave seyāyatane veditabbe yattha cakkhuñca nirujjhati rupa saññāca virajjati seyāyatane veditabbe yattha sotanca nirujjhati saddha saññāca virajjati seyāyatane veditabbe yattha ghānanca nirujjhati gandha saññāca virajjati seyāyatane veditabbe yattha jivhāca nirujjhati rasa saññāca virajjati seyāyatane veditabbe yattha kāyoca nirujjhati pottabba saññāca virajjati seyāyatane veditabbe yattha manoca nirujjhati dhamma saññāca virajjati seyāyatane veditabbe. Therefore, monks, that sphere should be known, wherein the eye ceases and the perception of forms fades away. The ear ceases and the perception of sounds fades away. The nose ceases and the perception of smells fades away. The tongue ceases and the perception of tastes fades away. The body ceases and the perception of tangibles fades away. The mind ceases and the perception of ideas fades away. That sphere should be known. Venerable Ñāṇananda, commenting on this riddle-like sermon of the Buddha, concludes that the Buddha is here referring to the cessation of the six sense spheres. Salayatana nirodhaṁ āuso bhagavata sandhāya bhāsita. Friends, it is with reference to the cessation of the six sense spheres that the Exalted One has prayed this sermon. The cessation of the six sense spheres is Nibbāna. All this goes to show that the concept of a world is the product of the six sense spheres. Those six measuring rods have measured out a world for us. Since the world is built up by the six sense spheres, it has also to cease by the cessation of those six sense spheres. That is why Nibbāna is defined as the cessation of the six sense spheres, Salayatana nirodho Nibbāna. All those measuring rods and scales lose their applicability with the cessation of the six sense spheres. How can there be an experience of cessation of the six sense spheres? The cessation here meant is actually the cessation of the spheres of contact. A sphere of contact presupposes a duality. Contact is always between two things, between I and forms, for instance. It is because of a contact between two things that one entertains a perception of permanence in those two things. Dependent on that contact, feelings and perceptions arise, creating a visual world. The visual world of the humans differs from that of animals. Some things that are visible to animals are not visible to humans. That is due to the constitution of the eye faculty. It is the same with regard to the ear faculty. These are the measuring rods and scales which build up a world. Now this world, which is a product of the spheres of sense contact, is a world of papancha, or proliferation. Nibbāna is called nippapancha because it transcends this proliferation, puts an end to proliferation. The end of proliferation is at the same time the end of the sixth sense sphere. There is a discourse in the section of the force in the Anguttara Nikāya which clearly brings out this fact. There we find Venerable Mahakoṭṭhita putting a question to Venerable Sariputta on this point. Venerable Mahakoṭṭhita and Venerable Sariputta are often found discussing intricate points in the Dhamma, not because they are in doubt, but in order to clarify matters for us. They are thrashing out problems for our sake. In this particular instance, Venerable Mahakoṭṭhita puts the following question to Venerable Sariputta. Channamauso pasāyatanānaṁ asesa virāga nirodhā atthaññaṁ kinci. Friend, with the remainder thus fading away and cessation of the six spheres of sense contact, is there something left? Venerable Sariputta's response was, Mahevangauso. Do not say so, friend. Venerable Mahakotita follows it up with three other possible alternatives, all of which Venerable Sariputta dismisses with the same curt reply. The three alternatives are Channang also Passayatanang Aseta Viraga Nirodha Nattanyang Kinchi. Friend, with the remainderless fading away and cessation of the 6 spheres of sense contact, is there nothing left? Channang also Passayatanang Aseta Viraga Nirodha Atticha Natticha Anyang Kinchi. Friend, with the remainderless fading away and cessation of the 6 spheres of sense contact, is it the case that there is and is not something left? Channanga Passayatanang Aseta Viraga Nirodha Nevati no Nattanyang Kinchi. Friend, with the remainderless fading away and cessation of the 6 spheres of sense contact, is it the case that there neither is nor is not something left? The mode of questioning takes the form of a tetralemma, and Venerable Sariputta dismisses all the 4 alternatives as inapplicable. Then Venerable Mahakotita asked why all these 4 questions were ruled out, and Venerable Sariputta explains. Channanga uso passayatanang asesa viraga nirodha attanyang kinchiti iti vadam appapanchang papanchi. Channanga uso passayatanang asesa viraga nirodha nattanyang kinchiti iti vadam appapanchang papanchi. Channanga uso passayatanang asesa viraga nirodha atticha nattichanyang kinchiti iti vadam appapanchang papanchi. Channanga uso passayatanang asesa viraga nirodha nevatti no nattyanyang kinchiti iti vadam appapanchang papanchi. Yavata uso channam passayatanang gati tavata papanchasa gati. Yavata papanchasa gati tavata channam passayatanang gati. Channanga uso passayatanang asesa viraga nirodha papancha nirodho papancha bhupasa. Friend, he who says with the remainderless fading away and cessation of the 6 spheres of sense contact, there is something left, is conceptually proliferating what should not be proliferated conceptually. Friend, he who says with the remainderless fading away and cessation of the 6 spheres of sense contact there is nothing left, is conceptually proliferating what should not be proliferated conceptually. Friend, he who says with the remainderless fading away and cessation of the 6 spheres of sense contact there is and is not something left, is conceptually proliferating what should not be proliferated conceptually. Friend, he who says with the remainderless fading away and cessation of the 6 spheres of sense contact there neither is nor is not something left, is conceptually proliferating what should not be proliferated conceptually. Friend, whatever is the range of the 6 spheres of sense contact, that itself is the range of conceptual proliferation. And whatever is the range of conceptual proliferation, that itself is the range of the 6 spheres of sense contact. By the remainderless fading away and cessation of the 6 spheres of sense contact, there comes to be the cessation and appeasement of conceptual proliferation. The commentator gives the following explanation to the expression attanyang kinchi. Is there something left? Tato parang kochi appamattakopi kileso atthiti puchati. According to him, Venerable Mahakotita is asking whether there is even a little defilement left after the cessation of the 6 spheres of sense contact. But the question is obviously not about the remaining defilements, in which case even a categorical negative could have been the correct answer. The question here is about the very usage of the expressions is and is not. With the cessation of the 6 spheres of sense contact, all 4 propositions of the tetralemma based on the 2 standpoints is and is not lose their applicability. They are rejected in toto. Here the papancha or conceptual proliferation implied is the very discrimination between is and is not. The entire world is built upon the 2 concepts is and is not. Being unaware of the sankhata or prepared nature of these concepts, we are accustomed to say this is as occasion demands. This recording machine before us is there. So also are the things which we presume to exist. We ourselves do exist, do we not? One could say, I am. Out of the 2 rapid processes going on within us every moment, namely arising and passing away, we are most of the time dwelling on the side of arising. The 2 concepts, is and is not, are structured on the 6 spheres of sense contact. not only is and is not, but also the entire logical structure connecting these two postulates is founded on these 6 spheres. Here then we see the fistfuls of inflammable incense powder the Buddha had directed towards language and logic, setting all that ablaze. What this discourse highlights is the fact that by the very cessation of the 6 spheres of sense contact, the cessation of conceptual proliferation is brought about. With reference to speculative views, particularly to those wrong views that were put aside as unexplained points, the Buddha uses the term Vitti-parila, delirium of views. Parila means delirious fever. Patients in delirium cry out for water. The worldlings in general are in high delirium. Even such teachers like Purana Kassapa and Nibbāna, who are trying to solve these speculative problems about the world by logic, were also in delirium. Their views, based on wrong reflection, were mere hallucinations. They kept on raising such questions because they had no insight into the nature of sankharas or preparation. The worldlings spend their whole lifetime running in search of the world's end. All that is papancha, conceptual proliferation. In fact, the term papancha is so pervasive in its gamut of meanings that it encompasses the entire world. Usually, the term is glossed over by explaining it with reference to tanha, maya and ditthi, bringing in cravings, conceits and views as illustrations of papancha. But that does not amount to an explanation proper. It is only a definition in extension by giving 3 instances of papancha. To rattle off the 3 instances is not a fit answer to the question what is papancha. The primary significance of papancha is traceable to the linguistic medium. We have already shown how the network of Dhamma spreads as soon as the peg and is driven down to earth as it were. The reality in the first person in grammar becomes a second and a third person to complete the picture. In logic too, a similar legerdemain takes place. Interminable questions of identity and difference lead the logician up the garden path. The world is precariously perched on a fictitious network of grammar and logic. It is as a solution to all this that the Buddha came out with the extraordinary prospect of a cessation of the 6 spheres of sense contact. This then is a level of experience realizable here and now. That is why the Buddha declared that the world is in this very fathom-long body with its perceptions and mind. Now as to the questions about the world, we have already pointed out that there is a circularity involved. Though one cannot find an end in something of a cyclic nature, there is still a solution possible. There is only one solution, that is to break the cycle. That is what the term Vattupacceda means. One can break the cycle. The cycle cannot be discovered by traveling. It is not out there, but in this very stream of consciousness within us. We have already described it as the vortex between consciousness and name and form. An allusion to the breach of the vortex is found in the following verse, which we have already discussed in connection with Nibbāna. Viññāṇam anidassanam anantam sabbatopabham. Yatha apocha patavi tejo vayo nagadhati. Yatha dīghancha rassancha anunthuram subhasubham. Yatha namancha rūpancha asesam uparujjati. Viññānasya nirodhena itthetang uparujjati. Consciousness, which is non-manifestative, endless, lustrous on all sides. Here it is that earth and water, fire and air, no footing find. Here it is that long and short, fine and coarse, pleasant and unpleasant, and name and form are cut off without exception. When consciousness has ceased, these are held in check herein. Here one can see how name and form are cut off. Viññāṇam anidassanam anantam sabbatopabham. Consciousness, which is non-manifestative, infinite and lustrous on all sides. In this consciousness, even the 4 great primaries, earth, water, fire and air, do not find a footing. Cakravala, or world system, is supposed to be made up of these 4 primary elements. Even the term Cakkavāla implies something cyclic. The word is a product of these primary elements, but these are not there in that non-manifestative consciousness. Such relative distinctions as long and short, subtle and gross have no place in it. Name and form cease there, leaving no residue. Like an expert physician who treats the germ of a disease and immunizes the patient, the Buddha effected a breach in the samsaric vortex by concentrating on its epicycle within this fathom-long body. The ever-recurrent process of mutual interrelation between consciousness and name and form, forming the epicycle of the samsaric vortex, was breached. With the cessation of consciousness comes the cessation of name and form. With the cessation of name and form comes the cessation of consciousness. That is the dictum of the Nalakalapi Sutta. Out of the two bundles of reeds left standing, supporting each other, when one is drawn, the other falls down. Even so, with the cessation of consciousness comes the cessation of name and form. With the cessation of name and form comes the cessation of consciousness. That is how the Buddha solved this problem.